generation Red Wing. This shot used non-fissionable tampers, an inert substitute, a material such as tungsten or lead was used. Its yield was 3.5 megatons, 85% fusion and only 15% fission. The public records for devices that produced the highest proportion of the yield via fusion reactions are the peaceful nuclear explosions of the 1970s. Others include the 50 megaton Tsar bomber at 97% fusion, 41, the 9.3 megaton Hardtack Poplar test at 95%, 42, and the 4.5 megaton Red Wing Navajo test at 95% fusion. 43. The most ambitious peaceful application of nuclear explosions was pursued with USSR with the aim of creating a 112 kilometers long canal between the Pechera River Basin and the Kama River Basin, about half of which was to be constructed through a series of underground nuclear explosions. It was reported that about 250 nuclear devices might be used to get the final goal. The Tigger test was to demonstrate the feasibility of the project. 3 of these clean devices of 15 kiloton yield each were placed in separate boilers spaced about 165 m apart at depths of 127 m. They were simultaneously detonated on the 23rd of March, 1971, catapulting radioactive plume into the air that was carried eastward by wind. The resulting trench was around 700 m long and 340 m wide, with an unimpressive depth of just 10-15 m. 44. Despite their clean nature, Theria still exhibits a noticeably higher, albeit mostly harmless, concentration of fission products. The intense neutron bombardment of the soil, the device itself and the support structures also activated their stable elements to create a significant amount of man-made radioactive elements like 6-deco. The overall danger posed by the concentration of radioactive elements present at the site created by these 3 devices is still negligible, but a larger scale project as was envisioned would have had significant consequences both from the fallout of radioactive plume and the radioactive elements created by the neutron bombardment. 45. On the 19th of July, 1956, AEC Chairman Lewis Strauss said that the Red Wing Zuni shot clean bomb test produced much of importance, from a humanitarian aspect. However, less than 2 days after this announcement, the dirty version of Bassoon, called Bassoon Prime, with a uranium-238 tamper in place, was tested on a barge off the coast of Bikini Atoll as the Red Wing tour shot. The Bassoon Prime produced a 5 megaton yield, of which 87% came from fission. Data obtained from this test, and others, culminated in the eventual deployment of the highest yielding U.S. nuclear weapon known, and the highest yield-to-weight weapon ever made, a 3-stage thermonuclear weapon with a maximum dirty yield of 25 megatons, designated as the B-41 nuclear bomb, which was to be carried by U.S. Air Force bombers until it was decommissioned. This weapon was never fully tested. 3rd generation. First and second generation nuclear weapons release energy as omnidirectional blasts. 3rd generation, 46, 47, 48. Nuclear weapons are experimental special effect warheads and devices that can release energy in a directed manner, some of which were tested during the Cold War but were never deployed. These include Project Prometheus, also known as Nuclear Shotgun, which would have used a nuclear explosion to accelerate kinetic penetrators against ICBMs. 49. Project Excalibur, a nuclear-pumped X-ray laser to destroy ballistic missiles. Nuclear-shaped charges that focus their energy in particular directions. Project Orion explored the use of nuclear explosives for rocket propulsion. 4th generation. The idea of 4th generation nuclear weapons has been proposed as a possible successor to the examples of weapons designs listed above. These methods tend to revolve around using non-nuclear primaries to set off further fission or fission reactions. For example, if antimatter were usable and controllable in macroscopic quantities, a reaction between a small amount of antimatter and an equivalent amount of matter could release energy comparable to a small fission weapon, and could in turn be used as the first stage of a very compact thermonuclear weapon. Extremely powerful lasers could also potentially be used this way, if they could be made powerful enough, and compact enough, to be viable as a weapon. Most of these ideas are versions of pure fusion weapons, and share the common property that they involve hitherto unrealized technologies as the primary stages. 50. While many nations have invested significantly in inertial confinement fusion research programs, since the 1970s it has not been considered promising for direct weapons use, but rather as a tool for weapons and energy-related research that can be used in the absence of full-scale nuclear testing. Whether any nation's area aggressively pursuing fourth-generation weapons is not clear. In many cases, as with antimatter, the underlying technology is presently thought to be very far from being viable, and if it was viable would be a powerful weapon in and of itself, outside of the nuclear weapons context, and without providing any significant advantages above existing nuclear weapons designs. 51. Pure fusion weapons. Since the 1950s, the United States and Soviet Union investigated the possibility of releasing significant amounts of nuclear fusion energy without the use of a fission primary. Such pure fusion weapons were primarily imagined as low-yield, tactical nuclear weapons whose advantage would be their ability to be used without producing fallout on the scale of weapons that release fission products. In 1998, the United States Department of Energy declassified the following sad smiley 1. Fact that the DoD made a substantial investment in the past to develop a pure fusion weapon. 2. That the US does not have and is not developing a pure fusion weapon. And 3. That no credible design for a pure fusion weapon resulted from the DoD investment. 52. Red mercury, a likely hoax substance, has been hyped as a catalyst for a pure fusion weapon. Cobalt bombs. A doomsday bomb, made popular by Nevil Shute's 1957 novel, and subsequent 1959 movie, On the Beach. The cobalt bomb is a hydrogen bomb with a jacket of cobalt. The neutron-activated cobalt would have maximized the environmental damage from radioactive fallout. These bombs were popularized in the 1964 film Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. The material added to the bombs is referred to in the film as cobalt-boron G. Such salted weapons were investigated by U.S. Department of Defense. 53. Fission products are as deadly as neutron-activated cobalt. The standard high-fission thermonuclear weapon is automatically a weapon of radiological warfare, as dirty as a cobalt bomb. Initially, gamma radiation from the fission products of an equivalent size fusion bomb are much more intense than Co-60, 15,000 times more intense at 1 hour, 35 times more intense at 1 week, 5 times more intense at 1 month, and about equal at 6 months. Thereafter fission drops off rapidly so that Co-60 fallout is 8 times more intense than fission at 1 year and 150 times more intense at 5 years. The very long-lived isotope S produced by fission would overtake the 60 Co again after about 75 years. 54. The Triple-Tigan nuclear salvo test. As part of the preliminary March 1971 Pekara-Karmar project produced a small amount of fission products and therefore a comparatively large amount of case material. Activated products are responsible for most of the residual activity at the site today, namely Co-60. As of 2011, fusion-generated neutron activation was responsible for about half of the gamma dose at the test site. That dose is too small to cause deleterious effects, and normal green vegetation exists all around the lake that was formed. 55, 56. Arbitrarily large multi-stage devices. The idea of a device which has an arbitrarily large number of telluride stages, with each driving a larger radiation-driven implosion than the preceding stage, is frequently suggested. 57, 58. But technically disputed. 59. There are well-known sketches and some reasonable-looking calculations in the open literature about two-stage weapons, but no similarly accurate descriptions of true three-stage concepts. 59. During the mid-1950s through early 1960s, scientists working in the weapons laboratories of the United States investigated weapons concepts as large as 1,000 megatons, 60, and Edward Teller reported work on a 10,000 megaton weapon code-named Sundial at a meeting of the General Advisory Committee of the Atomic Energy Commission. 61. Much of the information about these efforts remains classified. 62, 63, but Huyapan's ideas do not appear to have made it beyond theoretical investigations. While both the US and Soviet Union investigated, and in the case of the Soviets, tested, very high yield, for example plus 50-100 megaton, weapons designs in the 1950s and early 1960s. 64. These appear to represent the upper limit of Cold War weapon yields pursued seriously. Cold War warhead development trends from the mid-1960s onward, and especially after the Limited Test Ban Treaty, instead resulted in lower yield, highly compact warheads that gave greater options for deliverability. Following the concern caused by the estimated gigaton scale of the 1994 comet Shoemaker-Levy 9 impacts on the planet Jupiter, in a 1995 meeting at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, LLNL, Edward Teller proposed to a collective of US and Russian ex-Cold War weapons designers that they collaborate on designing a 1,000 megaton nuclear explosive device for diverting extinction-class asteroids, 10+ kilometer in diameter, which would be employed in the event that one of these asteroids were on an impact trajectory with Earth. 65, 66, 67. Neutron bombs. A neutron bomb, technically referred to as an enhanced radiation weapon, ERW, is a type of tactical nuclear weapon designed specifically to release a large portion of its energy as energetic neutron radiation. This contrasts with standard thermonuclear weapons, which are designed to capture this intense neutron radiation to increase its overall explosive yield. In terms of yield, ERWs typically produce about 1/10 that of a fission-type atomic weapon. Even with their significantly lower explosive power, ERWs are still capable of much greater destruction than any conventional bomb. Meanwhile, relative to other nuclear weapons, damage is more focused on biological material than on material infrastructure, though extreme blast and heat effects are eliminated. ERWs are more accurately described as suppressed yield weapons. When the yield of a nuclear weapon is less than 1 kiloton, its lethal radius from blast, 700 m, 2,300 feet, is less than that from its neutron radiation. However, the blast is more than potent enough to destroy most structures, which are less resistant to blast effects than even unprotected human beings. Blast pressures of upwards of 20 psi are survivable, whereas most buildings will collapse with a pressure of only 5 psi. Commonly misconceived as a weapon designed to kill populations and leave infrastructure intact, these bombs, as mentioned above, are still very capable of leveling buildings over a large radius. The intent of their design was to kill tank cruise tanks, giving excellent protection against blast and heat, surviving, relatively, very close to a detonation. Given the Soviets' vast tank forces during the Cold War, this was the perfect weapon to counter them. The neutron radiation could instantly incapacitate a tank crew out to roughly the same distance if the heat and blast would incapacitate an unprotected human, depending on design. The tank chassis would also be rendered highly radioactive, temporarily preventing its reuse by a fresh crew. Neutron weapons were also intended for use in other applications, however. For example, they are effective in anti-nuclear defenses, the neutron flux being capable of neutralizing an incoming warhead at a greater range than heat or blast.